you everybody. My name is Zen Zainal Mutakin. Thank you very much for the opportunity to the Indonesian Consulate in Los Angeles. I'm actually a student of Ibu Juliana Wijaya, but however, I'm not at Southeast Asian study. I'm at law school actually. So back home, I'm a lecturer at Islamic State University in Jakarta. As a disclaimer, so I am not a historian. I'm rather a lawyer, but as a matter of fact, if you are a lawyer in Indonesia, like here in the US, you have to deep into the history of your nation, into culture of your nation as a necessity, as part of your academic activities. Uh, I would like I would like to share my screen as well, so to make it easier for you to follow my presentation. I will try to I will try to do my best to explain everything actually in 15 minutes. It's rather very challenging exercise to explain very diverse, very long history in 15 minutes. But I try my best to do that. So I will give the title of my presentation as Becoming Indonesia. The reason why I say becoming, it's because, in my opinion, Indonesia as a nation, as a state, as an identity is still in the state of formation. It's not final, because as a matter of fact, we just have an independence as a state not long ago. It's like 1945, so it's very young if we compare it to, let's say, other states like the US. So becoming Indonesia, it means that we are as a state, we are as a nation, are actually in evolving, toward more Indonesia. I will explain in a minute what that mean. But simply, even if you see a name of Indonesia, it's quite unique. Let's say if you compare it to our neighbor, Malaysia. Malaysia is a Malay state. So it's predominantly Malay people when it was established. Thailand is a land for the Thai people. So predominantly it's Thai people who live there, who form a state. Burmese is Burm people. So it's basically a Burmese people. But Indonesia, there is not such an ethnic group called Indo, which is unique in the sense that we are actually getting our names from, not from our identification to our own culture, because it's actually a name that was given by European scholar, European explorer, who give the name to us. Before 1945, before 1945, there is no such a thing called Indonesia. Indonesia is only exists as a state, as a nation state in 1945. Before that, we have a long history of a nation or multi-nations. Why it's called multi-nations? Because as Ibu Julian has already described, Indonesia has hundreds of ethnic groups, which is not only it's different from each other in terms of languages. If you see the legal system of their culture, of their ethnicity is completely different. For example, we have what we call adat law, or as customary law, which is completely and totally different from, let's say, Aceh to Javanese, to Sundanese, to Papuan. So all these nations actually have their own languages, they have their own culture, they have their own legal systems, which is only have a commitment to united to form a state in 1945. Before that, me as a Sundanese, people who live in west part of Java is actually different so-called state from Ibu Juliana who are in East Java. I'm a different state from some people who I saw like a Sumatra name from Sumatra. So it's basically, let's say, independent sovereign before 1945, before, let's say, early 19th centuries. So as a nation, or as a state, we are really young, but as a nation, we have a long history of our culture. But as a matter of fact, actually, Indonesia probably is not a nation state, but it's multi-nation state, because we are a multi-ethnic group with different culture, with different languages, with different legal system, that then united to form a state. That's let's say kind of introduction for you to have in your mind when you are let's say, diving into the history of Indonesia. I give you less word than picture, suggested by the our colleague from the Pasadena. So basically, this is the Indonesian map. It's very big. Actually, if you crop this map and put it into the US, it's just like you are going from Seattle all the way to Boston, even much longer than that. Because if you fly from the very west part of Indonesia, which is in Aceh, which was struck by tsunami in early 2000, all the way to PNG, it takes you like 10 hours, 9 to 10 hour direct flight. It's so fast, it's so big. And we have, just like US, we have 3 different time zones. We have eastern part time zone, central part time zone, and western part of time zone. And we are actually right in between Pacific and Indian Oceans. This map probably is much, have give you a better clue where is Indonesia located. So basically we are right actually in the middle, or not in the middle actually, right in between Pacific and Indian. And why it's matter historically? Well, it's matter historically because, as Ibu Juanya said, let's say if you are a traders in 12th centuries from China, and you want to sell your product to India, and you choose to go by sea, the only route that you have to take is actually to go all the way down to the Malacca Strait, and they go up again to India. So you must go to Indonesian archipelago somehow if you want to trade between Middle East, between Africa, even between Europe and China. This is important also. Let's say we connect the Indonesian history to the more global history. If you I recall your global history, let's say in 12th century and 11th century, the center of civilization is around the Middle East, when we have the Umayyad and the Abbasid Empire, exists since 8th century when Islam came. And actually it's like, let's say people say before that you have Roman Byzantium Empire, and then you have Islamic Empire up I think until, let's say 13th to 14th century at the height of the civilization. And then by 13th century we have a new player coming, which is the Mongols, who basically attack every kingdoms from the China all the way to the Abbasid. And this actually have a very important impact to the growing of trade route using sea, because the trade was disrupted by land between, let's say, China and the Middle East. So the traders, they have to find a new route in order to avoid this conflict that happened during the 12th and 13th century because of the war between Mongol and the other empire. So because of that situation, more and more actually ship are coming to the archipelago because they want to trade with the China. The only way you go to China or to the eastern part of the Asia is actually going to Indonesia. That's why if you see, the Indonesian culture is actually basically mixing between what we call it East Asia and South Asia. Some of us is even from the appearance, from the skin, some more like, let's say, East Asia, some more like South Asia. If you go to Sumatra, for example, you will see people exactly like the Indian people, but some are mixed. So the color is much also mixed with the, let's say, people from the Melanesian. So I would like to describe this little bit just to connect you to the global history and how the Indonesia, let's say, as a nation and a state come into being. So here actually the general outline, if you study about Indonesia, normally the historian will divide the history of Indonesia into 3 different let's say phase, or 3 different period. Actually this is very broad, of course, to simplify everything, because for example if you study modern Indonesia, you will study about the, you know, revolutionary era. You have to learn about the old era. You have to learn about the new era and the reform era, etc. But this is very broad, let's say, timeline. So as a Burjulian, I have talked about a little bit. So basically, we have like pre-colonial era. Pre-colonial era, of course, you can go as far as possible, but as a matter of historical fact, normally the historian will say that, look, Indonesia, we can start at 4th or 5th century up to the 16th century for the pre-colonial era. This is the place where empires actually exist in Indonesia. The oldest and the biggest empire, of course, we have empire like Sailendra, for example, which established Borobudur. The picture here is Borobudur, which is established by Sailendra around 8th centuries. So the Borobudur is the biggest Buddhist temple on earth. It's not in other place, but it is in Indonesia, and it was established by Sailendra dynasty. And then after that, you have the biggest dynasty, which is Majapahit. But before Majapahit, we have the Sriwijaya. On the map here, actually, it's a map of Sriwijaya Empire, in which this empire is actually covering half of Southeast Asia. It's go all the way to Champa, which is now in Cambodia. They, let's say, it's a vassal. Some Sriwijaya has some vassals kingdom across Southeast Asia, but the Sriwijaya is very thriving. Is very important hub at the time. Is because exactly Sriwijaya is right in the middle as a hub between East Asia and Africa in the Middle East for trade route. Remember, one of the best port now at the moment is in Singapore. Why? Because Singapore is just like Sriwijaya. They are occupying the place of Sriwijaya that become a global hub. From the colonial period, long before the colonial period until today, the Malacca Strait that you will see here in between Indonesia and Malaysia and near to the Singapore and Riau and other islands is actually one of the busiest sea road and the busiest port on earth, on the planet. It's exactly there, the hub of the, you know, the trading road between West and East. After Sriwijaya, we have a very powerful kingdom called Majapahit, which is much wider than the Sriwijaya, because Majapahit also conquered some area in eastern part of Indonesia, which is the Spicy Island. Here, the Spicy Islands come into being. Actually, people from Java get the Spicy Island from eastern part of Indonesia and then bring it to Java and bring it to Sumatra, and people from the Middle East get this Spicy Island from the hub. So all the way through the history, then the people from the Middle East and people from the European, they want to know where is actually the Spicy Island is. All this, you know, history of the Portuguese colony and the Dutch colony is actually the history of finding the spices, because spices at the time was a lucrative commodity in Europe. So expensive, to the extent that even, for example, the Dutch are willing to trade or to exchange New York with a small island in Banda. Probably some of you didn't know that New York, which is now in the US, used to be part of the Dutch colony, and it's then exchanged with the British, because British at the time had a small island called Banda Island, where the biggest nutmeg company and production exists. So they traded, they exchanged. New York become the British colony, and the Banda Island become a Dutch company, a Dutch colony. It's so important that the spice is the lucrative commodity for the European. So back to Majapahit. Basically, Majapahit, if you imagine, Majapahit is basically the existing Indonesian archipelago at the moment, plus some part area of certain Philippines and some part area of the certain Thailand. So Majapahit basically covering some of the Thailand and Cambodia, all the way to the east to the Philippine archipelago in certain Philippines. That's why if you go to the Philippines, for example, even their numbers, their names have a lot of similarities with the Japanese and Indonesian culture, because that's the empire of Majapahit was. So after Majapahit, which is ended around, let's say, 15th, 16th centuries, came into being the Muslim Sultanates. So basically, Muslim Sultanates replacing the Majapahit kingdoms. but they do not united one each other, because at the time Majapahit was fall down and the small sultanate was exist from the archipelago at the very west, which is from Aceh Sultanate. One of the strongest sultanate was in Aceh and in Johor, and also in all the way to Raja Ampat. Raja Ampat is the former sultanate that was very famous at the time. So basically, Majapahit ended, and then followed by Muslim Sultanate, which is probably around 114 sultanate. Up until today, we have the association of a kingdom or sultanate in Indonesia, which is some of them are still in power culturally. Some of them are the sons or the inheritance of this kingdom. We have the association of sultanate in Indonesia, which is 114 sultanate at the time. So, make it story shorter, and then came colonialism. As you know, colonialism came always as a trade. But what is interesting in this story is about the Spanish. Actually, at that time, the Portuguese has been there since 14th, 15th to 16th century, and then the Dutch try to follow this route, because he want to get the spices also not from the Portuguese, but directly from the sources. That's why there is a conflict between the Dutch and the Portuguese in Southeast Asia. And if you history, the whole history of international law is actually history of the dispute between the Portuguese and the Dutch. In all legal cases in Southeast Asia, Saint Katrina Sea, etc., etc. I'm learning the history of international law, and it's amazing me, because all cases that actually lawyer disputed in Europe is actually all cases in Southeast Asia, which is in Indonesia. And what is also interesting is about the term Indian. We know that the American called the indigenous American called Indian, which is very, very strange, because actually historically Indian is not here. Indian is in the East. Why then European called the indigenous people of America as Indians? Actually because Columbus at that time tried to find a new road to East Indies and to India, because he or Spanish at the time really wanted to get a faster road to the Spicy Island and to the Indian island. And then at that time, Columbus started his voyage and then end up here in America, and he thought that he landed in India. And because it was in a bit to the Latin American, its culture almost similar, the climate almost similar. So historically, some said that's actually the reason why the people, indigenous people here called Indian, because the European thought they are landed in India, which is not, this is completely new continent. By the way, this is the colonialism. One important thing with the colonialism is that this is actually the beginning of the Indonesia as a state. This is the unintended consequences of the colonialisms. Without colonialism, I thought that there is in Indonesia. Why? Because the independent sultanate at the time, actually the sovereign. So every sovereign want to be an independent state. But because of the colonialism, people in Indonesia around early 20th century actually united and started to form a new identity as a nation. They basically use the similarity of languages that used by Majapahit as a trading languages. So basically Indonesian languages rooted in Malay, which is called lingua franca, which is actually language that used for trading, all the way from Champa to Raja Ampat, to Papua. These languages actually unite people all together to understand and to communicate each other, but also this unification of the languages actually form a new identity. So all people who are colonized by the Dutch are united and form a new identity, which called later by the name of Indonesia. We have then Sumpah Pemuda, or the oath of the youth, when they declare, okay, despite our diversity, we are one nation, which is Indonesia. We are one languages, which is Indonesia, and we are a mother nation, which is Indonesia. This is very important historical stage, because by this youth oath, actually, Indonesia as an identity of a nation born, and then it's continued to be a very important movement all the way up to the revolution in 1945. So officially Indonesia independence is 1945, although it is disputed because the Dutch still say that Indonesian independence is 1949 instead of 1945, but actually it's already resolved because the Dutch finally recognized Indonesian independence in 1945. And as a matter of fact, our independence is not given by the Dutch, but we are through revolution. We are like around 10 years of revolution in which all people are fighting against the Dutch colonization at the time. Okay, having said that, I would like to touch upon a little bit about the layers of the culture, which is actually connected to the history. From the history, timeline of history, actually we can summarize what I call it a layer of cultures. So Indonesia, when it was established in 1945, have a lot of layers of culture. Of course, we have layers of Hindu Buddhism civilization. We have Borobudur, we have Prambanan, and it's not completely demolished. So when Islam came to Indonesia, it's not at all demolished anything. So Borobudur is preserved, Prambanan is preserved. For example, wayang puppet, the puppet show is preserved. Even the culture is preserved. It's not replaced, but it's rather integrated into Islam. So the reason why is because Islam that came to Indonesia is Sufism Islam. It's not more, because we have strain of Islam, many strains of Islam, but Islam that came to Indonesia is more like Sufism Islam that can blend this local culture into the Islamicity of Islam. That's why some say that Islam in Indonesia is rather different from the other part of the Islamic world. The second layers of culture is, as I said, is actually Islamic elements, mostly Sufism orientation, and it's predominantly Sunni Shafi'i. If you learn about Islamic law a little bit, we have like four major Islamic schools like Shafi'i, Hanafi, Hanbali, and Maliki. And Southeast Asia mostly are Shafi'i, which is similar with Islam that practiced in Egypt, actually. Most people in Africa, for example, are Maliki. So Islam, let's say, the second layer of the culture. And the third one, of course, we have a Western Christian tradition that was introduced actually through colonialism, through the European coming to Indonesia, through missionary, through, all these colonial enterprise activities from trading to everything. So basically from this, when the founding fathers think about what should Indonesia look like in 1940s, they are debated. Should Indonesia become a Muslim state? Because we are 90% Muslim. Because most of the heroes are Muslim. The Sultanate are those who are fighting against the Dutch. Should become a Muslim state? Should we become a completely other state? So basically the debate is at the time between becoming Indonesia as a Muslim state or non-Muslim state. To make a story short, basically finally the founding father agreed that Indonesia is not going to be a Muslim state, but it will recognize Islam as part of important elements within it, along with other religions, because we have other religions as well. We have Hindu, we have Buddha, we have now Confucian. So at that time, finally, we decided to adopt what we call Pancasila, or 5 principles, which is actually, it's kind of a creation or innovation or creative engagement of our founding fathers to combine everything. We would like to combine Western civilization. We would like to combine Islamic aspect. We would like to combine socialism. We put everything all together, become what we call it now Pancasila, as Ibu Juliana have said. And the logo here, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, as Ibu Juliana said, is actually taken from old manuscript called Sutasoma. Sutasoma is an old document in Tamliset, which is from Majapahit Empire, 14th century empire. This is actually the original script, which means diversity. Challenge. What is the challenge ahead that facing us as a nation? The most important thing, according to my observation, is actually diminishing locality. Remember that when 1945 we had a commitment to establish a new nation state, which is a unitary nation state, and we want to put all this identity into one identity called identity of Indonesia, the unintended consequences of becoming a unity in Indonesian unity is actually diminishing locality. For example, what? For example, I'm a Sundanese, but I myself cannot write and cannot read my own script. This is the Sundanese script here. I cannot read it, but there it exists. It's still used, still 1940, 1950. But Juliana probably doesn't know how to write in Japanese script. People in Aceh, for example, no longer be able to write in Gayo script, which is old script. We have hundreds of like this, and all dying. Why? Because everybody knows of Indonesian languages. TV are speaking in Indonesia, newspaper are in Indonesia, the instruction of school, for example, in Indonesia. That is a good thing in one side to unite Indonesia, but the bad thing is actually the locality is dying. And we have to think as a nation how to preserve this locality. Otherwise, we don't have the identity anymore. The second thing is actually the rising of fundamentalism. Remember that during the 1945, the founding fathers talk about what is the foundation of state that we are going to establish. That aspiration still exists today. Some of the Indonesian groups actually still want to make Indonesia a Muslim state instead of Pancasila state. The third one is actually ethno-religious tension. In early 2000 or 1990, since 1997, actually we have so-called mini civil war in some area in eastern part of Indonesia where Muslim and Christian and some ethnic group and Java and Madura actually fighting for around 2 years and killing each other. So this is already, let's say, handled very well, gone into completely settled in 2003. But actually, as a matter of fact, due to the nature of the diversity, this challenge will looming actually above the Indonesian nation all the time. And the last one, of course, we are a new democracy. We just started our democracy in 1997, 1998 with the downfall of Sukarno regime. We are now a full-fledged democracy. We have already 5 or 4 elections, which considered as fully democratic according to many observers. So, but the question is how we can keep our democracy sustainable, because we have a whole long history of authoritarian regime during the Sukarno and Suharto era. Some now, for example, say, well, probably because democracy is too complicated and democracy is not easy to make a consensus. Let's go back to the old time of the authoritarian regime, etc. I think I hope I cover everything. So of course we will continue with the question and answer, and I'm more than happy to to engage in a dialogue about this. I'm sorry if I'm not covering everything, because as I said, it's very difficult, it's very challenging, to cover, very complex history in 15 minutes. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. I feel educated. That's